let's talk a little bit about IPA, or the International Phonetic Alphabet. Now, one of the things that you've heard before is that writing is not language, and the purpose of a phonetic alphabet is to get at that idea. It's a way to represent language strictly in terms of the sounds. So, in point of fact, you can't have anything like a silent letter or a letter that's pronounced differently in one word or another in a phonetic alphabet. The phonetic alphabet is there to help you replicate the sounds of the language. Now, through the various exams and different things that you're doing in the workbook for this class, you're going to be asked to learn a lot of different things. So I want you to understand that I can't state strongly enough that this skill, the ability to transcribe and to read transcriptions of IPA, is the most important skill for you to learn in this class, period. This is the most important skill. And so what I would recommend you do, you'll notice that we spread out the exercises in the workbook for IPA. We spread them out over 2 different weeks, and the reason for that is you need to learn this. I also recommend that in addition to doing everything in the workbook, that you take just a few minutes every day and sit down. What I used to do is just take in those days I'd take the student newspaper when I was an undergraduate student, or just take any piece of writing and just begin transcribing it. Just spend a few minutes every day kind of exercising that muscle, because if you cannot read IPA, then you are not going to understand what comes later on in the chapter. And I've had students in the past who thought, well, what I'm going to do is I'll try to find some way to cheat, or I'll memorize the chart, but I won't really understand the chart. And what happens is they do great on the exam, on that exam learning the chart, and then after that, since they haven't actually mastered it, they don't really know what those things mean, they just know where to put them on the chart, they struggle and almost always then fail. So every day I want you to practice IPA, or the International Phonetic Alphabet. And so that's really what we're going to focus on right now. Now, 2 things to note. One is general and one is specific. And I'll start with the general, which is that if you go online and you look at places where people have represented IPA, you might notice some differences. And that's because there are different forms of phonetic transcription. And we use a simplified version of this. Now, if you go to non-American sites, and you sometimes don't know, they'll give you sample words of what the sounds sound like, and you'll think that you're pronouncing them correctly, but in fact you're pronouncing that incorrectly, because you as an American are reading it as an American, and the person who wrote it is representing it as a British person. That's why you need to learn IPA in this way. The other thing is specific, and that is if you pay attention and you look carefully at the chart that's in the textbook and the chart that's in the workbook, for inexplicable reasons, they're organized differently. So, for example, the stops and the affricates are on separate lines in the textbook, but they're in the same line in the workbook. And another thing is you might notice that there are voiced and voiceless categories in each of them. And if you look carefully, you'll see in the one, voiceless comes first and then voiced, and then the other, it's switched around. So it's important not just to memorize visually that chart, but more importantly to understand what every part of it means. So that's what we're going to do now. Okay. You need to notice that if you read the chart from left to right, really what you're looking at is the place that a sound is articulated in the mouth. So we're going to start with the consonant sounds. Okay, and so if you look, you have the broad categories of labial, dental, palatal, velar, glottal. Right? And so what you have when you see labial is the lips. Right? It's the lips. How those are used, and then back further the dental, and then back further the palatal velar. If you learned if you studied the chart of the mouth and all the parts of the mouth and the respiratory system that are used in speaking, those terms should mean something to you. And so each of these is going further and further back in the mouth in terms of the place of articulation. And then the other part, the downward, is in essence what we call the manner of articulation, how you articulate it. So, for example, we'll start with the stops, the labial stops. They call them labial because, of course, this refers to the lips. Labial refers to the lips. And so the bilabial, p and b, p, b, p, b. These are stops in the same way that t, d, k, g, that these are all stops. And when you say it, you kind of feel that there's a point of stoppage. Whereas with something like with the fricatives, for example, you can say sh. You can say those for a long time, but you can't really do duh for a long time. It's d. There's a stop sound. And so this is really the difference between stops and fricatives. Okay, so now what's the difference between voiced and unvoiced? The difference between voiced and unvoiced is essentially whether you're moving, whether you're moving your vocal cords when you make the sound. So, for example, P, the p, 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 p. I want you to take your fingers and put them right here, right there, and say p, 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 p. And you'll feel that when you do the P sound, p, 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 that there's no movement. But if you do b, 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 you'll start to feel that during the B sound there's a vibration. B, b, b. That's voicing. That's what voicing is. And so the bilabials are simply these two sounds together. P, b. The t and d are dental and the alveolar. So along the alveolar ridge there, your tongue will tap that when you say t, d, t, d. T is voiceless. D, d, d is voiced. Okay. K, voiceless. G, voiced. K, g. And yes, you should sit down and seem like a crazy person doing this over and over again until you have a sense of it. Because what's going to happen later on is you're going to encounter, when we're studying other languages or other forms of English that are older, sounds that don't exist in modern English. And you need to know what these, not just what the sounds are, but what they mean. What do we mean by voiced and what we mean by voiceless? Okay. With the fricatives, of course, we have v, okay, and notice that we have the voiceless with the theta and the, which is the thy, and that symbol is called. So there's the theta and the is the ed. Okay, sh, j, sorry, z, sh, j. Okay, and as you move further back, you're hearing these different sounds, and they give you examples of these in your book. And also, if you look later on in the chapter, they give you multiple examples of each of these: the ch, the j, the m, the n, the ing, which is the ng sound. One way, which are the nasals, the liquids. One way to help you remember lateral and retroflex is pretty easy. L starts with the word lateral starts with the word L, and the L sound is the lateral. Starts with retroflex starts with R. Again, the same. Okay. Most students, I think, find once they understand what we mean by nasal, what we mean by stops, what we mean by fricatives, that sound, what we mean by that, I think most students understand that for the consonants. The vowel sounds are where people get very confused, especially when they're looking at a site that was not produced by someone who speaks their native language. So if you look then at the vowel chart, and this is one I think that students have a lot more difficulty in mastering, you'll notice that once again, it's as if there's a person looking to the left. And so there's the front, center, and back vowels. And this is the front of the mouth is the place of articulation, the center and the back, high, mid, and low. Okay. And so we're going to start with the front of the mouth. Okay. And the lowercase I is pronounced E. E. Every time you see that, that's E. Uppercase I is pronounced I. Next down, what we call the closed E, which you might think is the lowercase e, is A, pronounced A. The open E, or the big one, is E. And then when you see the two, this thing that looks like an A and an E together, that's pronounced ash. And if it's hard to remember what ash, if you can remember it's ash, the sound of ash is ah. Now you might see that sometimes there's ash with a colon after it. That is what we call long ash, which is to say it's said longer. It's said longer. And that will become more important when we get to Old English. That's ah, right? Well, if you just go through these, you'll see that we have E, and just say these E, I, A, eh. You can sort of feel it going further down your mouth, right? When you go to the back of the mouth, on the other hand, in modern English, often ones that people find difficult are the smaller U, which is oo, oo, oo. The next one down, which looks like, is pronounced It's oo, oo, and then O. That's an easy one for everyone because O is pronounced O. Aw, and then ah. So it goes oo, o, ooh, o, ah. Okay. Now, the thing in the middle, that's a very helpful one. That right there in the middle, it looks like an upside down E. That's the sound that we call the schwa, and that's just the Now, sometimes students get the one that looks more like a horseshoe and less like an upside down E. They get that wrong, and they get them mixed up because, of course, the word put is not It's not put. That would be a different word. So, is the schwa, and is the big U, and the little u is oo. So very often students will find those confusing. This will take practice, and you need to master this skill. Do not be afraid to put yourself in a room by yourself, watch this video over and over again, make sure you master those sounds, look at your book, you'll see there are example words, samples if you forget. Your book is written with the idea of modern English speakers in mind. Practice these sounds over and over again until you really know when you see them instantly what they are. Because if you're having to go in chapter 4, chapter 5, if you're having to go back and look at this chart, it's going to take you forever. It's going to be really almost impossible to learn what you're learning there. Okay. So work on your IPA, practice it every day.